G'day and welcome to Reality Check. Before we start this week's show, a little bit about this week's sponsor. Dr. Stephen Gundry is sharing his findings about a potential toxin that's in many of the, quote, healthy foods that some scientists push us to eat. They may actually be causing digestive issues for millions of people worldwide. Warning signs including weight gain, fatigue, digestive discomfort and stiff joints, even skin problems. And Dr. Gundry says these signs, these side effects, are often mistaken for normal signs of aging. You just have to know which foods are actually healthy and which contain this hidden potential toxin. He's put together an informative video you can watch at gutcleanseprotocol.com/Ross. That's gutcleanseprotocol.com/Ross. We're going to link to it below the video, and again, that's gutcleanseprotocol.com/Ross. Okay, now let's get on with the show. G'day and welcome to this special election edition of Reality Check. I'm Ross Coulthart and we're in the final days of the 2024 presidential election campaign. And of course, the issue everyone's thinking about, of course, is UFOs, or at least that's what Donald Trump is saying. Donald Trump has been telling people in recent interviews, including Joe Rogan, that one of the questions he's being asked about the most on the campaign trail is the mystery of UFOs, unidentified flying objects, or as we more politely call them these days, unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAPs. So I thought in the run-up of the final days of the election campaign, it'd be a good idea to look at the two candidates and see where they stand on UFOs, UAPs, and also to have a look at the history of the subject with presidential candidates and presidents going back in the past. So let's start with what the official government position is on UAPs. And the Pentagon officially has said in March this year there is no evidence that the US government or any private companies have reversed engineered extraterrestrial technology, nor are there any confirmed sightings of UAPs having alien origin, and this all contradicts multiple whistleblowers, including David Grush and Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon, who've said there is evidence being held secretly by the government of UAPs, of an NHI, a non-human intelligence presence on this planet. It all sounds like some wacky conspiracy theory, but as I found when I went digging back in the archives, there's been an extraordinary amount of candour amongst presidential candidates and presidents, and the subject of UAPs doesn't deserve to have the stigma and taboo that's attached to it. So in that context, let's start with what I think is probably one of the seminal moments in politics on the subject of UFOs. So in 2007, NBC's Tim Russert asked a very curly question of a Democratic presidential candidate, Dennis Kucinich. And he was asked, this is a Cleveland Democratic representative, Dennis Kucinich, he was asked, had he ever seen a UFO? And Tim Russert was very well informed because Kucinich answered honestly. And Russert said, Shirley MacLaine, it's always Shirley's fault, she's the one. How is it that an actress, by the way, can ask and admit that she knows about UFOs and she's had encounters with UFOs and nobody gives her that much of a hard time? But if a presidential candidate admits it, they get vilified. Russert asked, Shirley MacLaine writes in her new book that you sighted a UFO over her home in Washington state, that you found the encounter extremely moving, that it was a triangular craft, silent and hovering, that you felt a connection to your heart and heard directions in your mind. Now, did you see a UFO? Russert asked the presidential candidate. And boy, did Dennis Kucinich squirm. After a while, he answered, I did. And the rest of the account, it was an unidentified flying object. Okay, it's unidentified. And the rest of his answer was quite disastrous. But I believe Kucinich answered honestly. But what's interesting is what happened to Dennis Kucinich. His political campaign was destroyed from that moment. And from that moment, the whole notion of a political candidate admitting any kind of an interest in UFOs, UAPs, became political poison. It's one of the most iconic moments in presidential campaign history for how to lose a presidential election. And that's really sad because, as you'll see today, there's been quite a lot of admissions by multiple presidents that they have in fact engaged with the UFO subject, and in some cases they've even seen UFOs. And as anyone with half an eye on the subject in the last few years knows, there's been a series of admissions building since the 2017 New York Times stories by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, which revealed the existence of a secret UAP UFO investigation program inside the Pentagon. And this culminated very much in a decision in a report made by the Office of Director of National Intelligence in 2021, where it was formally admitted, basically, that UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena, are real, and that they do pose a potential flight safety risk and a threat to national security, a potential threat to national security. It doesn't get any more clear than that. And the thing that frustrates me as a journalist is why the rest of the mainstream media don't wake up and realise the significance of that ODNI admission. I think in the context of all of this, we also need to acknowledge that in this particular election campaign, there's been a huge social media activist movement, spearheaded in part by civil rights attorney Danny Sheehan and veteran social issues campaigner Jim Garrison through their New Paradigm Institute. And they were lobbying for questions to be asked about UFOs, UAPs, in the several presidential debates. And of course, those questions weren't asked because of the cow-towing, lick-spittling, grovelling, total toady mainstream media types who allow themselves to be so egregiously and shamefully manipulated by what has been a multi-decades-long Pentagon and intelligence community-driven cover-up to conceal the fact that the government knows a damn sight more about UAPs, non-human intelligence, than it ever cares to admit. So what is the position of both presidential candidates in the run-up to this Tuesday's presidential election? Well, let's start with Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris. And let's, to be honest about this, say very, very quickly that her position on UAPs is a big, fat nothing. The White House under Joe Biden has, of course, made a number of statements, and most of the more interesting statements came at the time of the alleged UAP shootdowns in February 2023, when there was a mass public hysteria about a balloon from the Chinese government that was flying across the continental USA. No explanation, of course, for the remaining 3 unexplained objects, one of which I'm very, very sure was anomalous. But in the course of the government commentary about this, the White House press secretary said on the 13th of February 2023, there is again no indication of aliens or extraterrestrial activity with these recent takedowns. Wanted to make sure that the American people knew that, all of you knew that. And it was important for us to say that from here because we've been hearing a lot about it. And yet, a lot of people in Congress aren't buying it. Jake Kirby, the National Security Council spokesman, again on the 13th of February 2023, he was asked specifically about the issue of UAPs, and he gave a very kind of bland, vanilla commentary about the subject of UAPs. He said, the President instructed the intelligence community to take a broad look at the phenomenon of UAPs. Indeed, President Biden conducted the first ever daily intelligence briefing devoted to this phenomenon back in June 2021. He was briefed that this is not just an issue for the United States, but one for the rest of the world. And as I said, our friends and our partners are dealing with this as well. We've worked on a bipartisan basis to stand up an office in the Pentagon to study this in partnership with the intelligence community, academic community and private sector. These unidentified aerial phenomena have been reported for many years without explanation or deep examination by the government. President Biden has changed all that. We are finally trying to understand them better. Well, what a load of BS. That's completely untrue. The simple fact is that the role of the Pentagon's ARRO office, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, has been to maintain the cover-up. They have willfully, actively ignored whistleblowers who've come to them with very direct, first-hand information that deserves fuller investigation. So let's have a look at, we'll get to Trump. I'm saving Trump for later, former President Trump. We all know that multiple presidents, at least Obama, Clinton, Reagan and Bush Sr. were all briefed on the UAP subject because each of them has made admissions, or people close to them have made admissions that they were briefed. President Clinton has actually admitted sending one of his very senior counsel, a guy called Webster Hubbell, to investigate UFOs and who killed JFK. And Webster later wrote in a book that, quote, he'd looked into both but wasn't satisfied with the answers I was getting. And that's pretty much what President Clinton has said about his efforts to get to the bottom of the UAP mystery as well. In 1995, when Clinton was in Ireland on a tour, there was a little boy called Ryan who'd asked him about Roswell, the alleged landing of alien craft in 1947 in New Mexico. And President Clinton went to great efforts to say in front of a huge crowd, as far as I know, an alien spacecraft did not land in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. And Ryan, if the US Air Force did recover alien bodies, they didn't tell me about it either. And I want to know. And I can tell you that was a very pointed and quite deliberate comment by President Clinton, because he really did want to know. He was very well briefed, I understand, about what had been going on, and he did make a very genuine effort to get to the bottom of the mystery, but he was thwarted, actively blocked from finding out much more about what's really going on. It is my contention that President Clinton was willfully obstructed by people in the Pentagon and the intelligence community from learning more about a covert retrieval and reverse engineering program of non-human technology. Think about the implications of what President Clinton said to that little boy in Ireland in light of what Lou Elizondo said to me on NewsNation just a few months ago. Lou went on the record, a former Pentagon UAP investigator with top secret SCI clearances, went on the record and actually admitted that he knew Roswell was the real crash of an alien spacecraft. He apparently was cleared within his DOPSA, within his Defence Office pre-publication security review permissions, to reveal that Roswell was indeed the crash of an alien spacecraft. So either Lou Elizondo is lying or has been misled, or the President of the United States was misled by whoever it was had told him that there was no evidence that Roswell was the crash of an alien spacecraft. Think about that. This is the Commander-in-Chief of the United States at the time being willfully thwarted by people in the defence and intelligence community from learning the truth about a seminal incident in human history, a first contact between humans and non-human intelligence. And mark my words, the public are going to find out, I suspect, very, very soon that the President was lied to, and multiple presidents have been lied to. President Carter, who had his own UFO sighting before he became president, pledged in his original presidential campaign, "One thing's for sure, I'll never make fun of people who say they've seen unidentified objects in the sky. If I become president, I'll make every piece of information this country has about UFO sightings available to the public and the scientists." Now, of course, President Carter did not honour that pledge when he reached office. the UFO secrets stayed hidden. But what we do know is that Danny Sheehan, who now, of course, I've mentioned previously, is leading a global disclosure activism effort to expose the UAP mystery. Danny Sheehan was hired as part of a congressional research investigation to actually find out what it was that the government knew about UFOs. And he has testified that he was given access as part of that presidentially authorised investigation to look at hitherto unreleased Project Blue Book files, which he says showed US soldiers recovering an alien spacecraft. Now, that photograph, of course, has never been made public. We've never been able to verify Danny's claims. But what's very, very interesting is nobody has ever denied it either. It's a really curious situation we have here, that President Carter was determined to get to the truth of the matter, asked for an inquiry, was initially allegedly knocked back by George Bush Sr. when he was the head of the CIA, the director of the CIA. And so he asked for a Congressional Research Service inquiry to be organised by a woman called Marcia Smith. And it was Marcia Smith who brought Danny Sheehan in. And it's Danny Sheehan, a civil rights attorney of some renown, who says that he was given permission to access enormous numbers of UFO files which have never been released to the public. And these included the photograph or photographs of this retrieval of an alien spacecraft. I find that incredible, and I find it amazing just how willfully ignorant a lot of the mainstream media are about following up leads like that. So that's President Carter. Ronald Reagan, of course, also had his own encounter with a UFO in a 1974 plane flight. And the pilot that night, a guy called Bill Painter, later described the object trailing their plane. He described how it took off at a 45-degree angle at a huge rate of speed. It just disappeared. Quote, "Everyone on the plane was surprised. The UFO went from normal cruise speed to fantastic speed instantly." And President Reagan apparently later described how the object, quote, "went straight up into the heavens." Whatever it was, it certainly caught Ronald Reagan's imagination, because Reagan often talked about aliens. He was very open about the possibility or the likelihood of there being aliens engaging with this planet. And he's, of course, very famous for asking his Soviet counterpart, Mikhail Gorbachev, during a Swiss arms control summit, "What would you do," he asked Gorbachev, "if the US were suddenly attacked by someone from outer space? Would you help us?" And President Gorbachev answered, "No doubt about it." And Reagan apparently said, "We too." And I think Reagan was fascinated by the idea that a threat from outer space by a non-human intelligence would bring humanity together, that we'd forget our differences and think of ourselves more as humans. And he actually went on to use that analogy about an alien attack in a speech to the United Nations, where he said, quote, "Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognise this common bond. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war?" Apparently, Reagan's staff rolled their eyes when he started talking about what they pejoratively referred to as little green men, but good on him for raising the subject, because I'm pretty sure Ronald Reagan was briefed into what we now know is the legacy UAP retrieval and reverse engineering program, and so was former President Obama after he was president. In 2021, former President Barack Obama told James Corden, quote, "When I came into the office, I was like, all right, is there a lab somewhere where we're keeping the alien specimens and spaceship? And you know, they did a little bit of research, and the answer was no." And I'm telling you, President Obama was lied to. Think about that again. A commander-in-chief of the United States of America was willfully lied to by people within the defence and intelligence community about just what it is that the United States has hidden away in private facilities, possibly within the confines of a private aerospace company. What Obama has said is, I'm being serious here, is that there is footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are. We can't explain how they moved, their trajectory. They did not have an easily explainable pattern. Now, that was a profound comment for a former president to make, and especially in the context of what I know is that apparently President Obama sought and received a top-secret SCI briefing on the UAP issue after he was president. He wasn't briefed while he was president. But it's quite profound. I think Obama, probably more than any other president, has come close to admitting that there really is something to this mystery. Now, let's get to Trump. As former President Trump has acknowledged, one of the questions he's been getting asked the most on the campaign trail is what the government really knows about UFOs and UAPs. And this isn't the only time he's talked about this. In the final weeks again of the last 2020 election campaign, he was asked by his son, Don Trump Jr., if he would ever tell the public about the alleged 1947 Roswell incident. And I think what President Trump said at the time was very telling. It was a very clearly pre-organised Q&A. There was a bit of a nudge, nudge, wink, wink. He knew the question was coming and he couldn't help himself. He had this ironic smile on his lips as he answered, and Don Trump was practically giggling behind the camera. And President Trump said, "I won't talk to you about what I know about it, but it's very interesting." Now, that's one hell of a hint from then President Trump. So in October 2020, Trump also pledged that he also would take a good, strong look at the government program on UFOs. And this came shortly after the Pentagon had announced a task force in 2020 to investigate the subject. He's a bit of a tease, Trump, because sometimes he feigns complete indifference to the subject of UAPs, UFOs. I suspect because he's frightened of the Kucinich phenomenon. He's frightened of the public blowback if he admits what I suspect to be the case, which is that he's actually intensely interested in the subject. And that's belied by the fact that he had that curious exchange with his son, Don Jr. And let's not forget also what happened in December 2020. I think this is one of the very interesting roadblocks or roadmarks along the way. Haim Eshed, a very, very well-respected, very senior former head of the Israeli Defense Ministry's Space Directorate, in December 2020 gave an interview to a Hebrew newspaper where he claimed that aliens have asked for it not to be published that they are here on this planet because, quote, humanity is not ready yet. And Mr. Eshed also claimed that President Trump knew of the existence of these aliens on this planet and that he was on the verge of revealing the details but was asked not to do so because of concerns from within the Pentagon and the intelligence community of mass public hysteria. How blooming condescending if that's really the case, why we're not being told this full story. Is it really the case that the public would get hysterical if we learned about the existence of a non-human intelligence? I really strongly doubt that. To put what we're talking about here today in context, multiple presidents have promised over many, many decades to get to the bottom of the UAP mystery, and all of them have failed miserably. And that's why I think we really should take what former President Trump is saying with a huge grain of salt. As early as 1948, President Truman ordered oral briefings on a weekly basis to be given to him by the US Air Force because he was concerned that the spate of UFO sightings over the country at that time were a national security threat and an issue that he needed to be across as president. So coming back to Trump, Lex Fridman interviewed Donald Trump in September this year, and he asked Trump, "A lot of people are interested in footage of UFOs. Will you help push the Pentagon to release more footage, which a lot of people claim is available?" And Trump answered, "Oh yeah, sure, I would do that. I'd love to do that. I have to do that." And he also promised to release classified documents on the JFK assassination. Well, look, frankly, I'm not holding my breath, but I do think the public should hold Mr. Trump to his promise if he does become president. In another appearance on the Hugh Hewitt podcast in September last year, former President Trump admitted he was formally briefed on UFOs during his time as president. And I've heard this as well, that he sought and received what I'm told was a very limited briefing on what the US actually does know about UFOs. But I'm told he was briefed into the fact that the US has retrieved non-human technology, craft, and that there is an active reverse engineering program underway. Now, he's also acknowledged that he's spoken to pilots, and I think sometimes this is used to muddy the waters, to suggest that the only briefing that he ever received was from pilots who told him about incidents like the Nimitz incident from 2004, where a swarm of UFOs were seen around a US battleship carrier fleet. That's not the case. This was a formal briefing that the president was given at the time. In June this year, Donald Trump told Logan Paul that he has access to UFO files after being asked about what information he had about the existence of alien life. And there's a lot of skepticism about that because, frankly, his security clearances were curtailed quite stringently by President Biden after the appalling recklessness with which he dealt with very secret files, top secret SCI files at Mar-a-Lago. And that, of course, led to the FBI raid and the subsequent attempts to prosecute former President Trump for keeping hold of files that he'd denied having possession of. But in the course of that interview with Logan Paul, Trump was asked, "Am I a believer? No, I probably can't say that I am. But I have met with people that are serious people that say there are some really strange things that they see flying out there. They have people that are very smart and very solid who've said they believe there was something out there. And, you know, it makes sense that they could be. I've never been convinced, even despite that, you know. For some reason, it's not my thing. But a lot of people believe that it's true. A lot of very good, solid people believe it's true." Now, I do not for a moment believe that Trump is in any doubt whatsoever about the reality of the non-human intelligences engaging with our planet, because I know that he's been briefed about it. And I think what's happening is he's terrified of putting a foot wrong and finding himself again facing the accusation that he has breached national security constraints by revealing what he was given a briefing about by a very, very closed group of people. Now, he also was asked, when he was asked about aliens, he said that he'd spoken to Air Force personnel who claimed to see aircraft round in form going like 4 or 5 times faster than my super jet fighter plane. I think he's referring to the F-22. And I mean, a lot of what President Trump has said about this is contradictory at times, but pressed on whether he had access to information on alien life and UAPs by Logan Paul, Trump actually replied, "I have access, and I speak to people about it. I've actually had meetings on it, and they will tell you there's something going on." So I do think we have to be extremely careful with promises made by any presidential candidate that they're going to release the UFO files. I don't know what they tell these guys when they get into power, but what I'm told with the Democrat side of things is that the decision was made by Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor to the president, President Biden, that because the Schumer amendment didn't pass in December of 2023, the subject of potential disclosure of UAP information would be put on the shelf, on the back burner for another year or so. They didn't want to have this as an election issue throughout 2024. So for the current president, Joe Biden, and for Kamala Harris, it's been a non-issue, and she's made absolutely no comment about this on the campaign trail because the weak-kneed, flibbity-gibbet, soft, toffee-nosed lick-spittles that constitute the mainstream media have completely failed to ask the question. But Trump's an enigma. Watch him closely. He knows something. I know he knows something. I know he's been briefed, and he wants to talk about it. And it is very much part of his theme to break down the bulwarks of the dark state. If there really is a cover-up that's lied to consecutive presidents about the truth on UAPs, I suspect Donald Trump might very well want to be the president that breaks that story wide open. Thanks very much for joining Reality Check. And heaven help us, good luck in the election. Hello and welcome back to Reality Check. Today we've got Andrea Lani to speak to, Dr. Andrea Lani. Dr. Andrea Lani is an Italian-born, Belgian-based aerospace scientist with a PhD in engineering sciences. He's worked with institutions such as NASA, Stanford, the NATO Science and Technology Organization, and the von Karman Institute, leading the development of models and software for hypersonic re-entry, space weather, and solar phenomena simulations. He's been published in the world's top journal for aerospace engineering, the prestigious Progress in Aerospace Sciences. He has co-authored more than 100 scientific papers so far, and he's currently working on an EU project developing a magnetic shielding prototype for space vehicles. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because outside of his official work, and Andrea is at pains to emphasize that his esoteric and paranormal interests have no connection at all with any of the official institutions that he works with, Dr. Lani has been a lifelong experiencer of UAPs and other anomalous phenomena since an extraordinary event that he and his family witnessed when he was an 8-year-old boy. A lot of his private research focuses on using deep meditation, inspired by protocols developed by the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, in the 1970s. They're the so-called Stargate protocols. And he uses this to gain an understanding of the anomalous phenomena that he says he's experiencing, including time anomalies and even psychic interaction and communication with non-human intelligences. And like the solid scientist he is, he's exploring ways to verify and measure the phenomenon. It's his work with hyperspectral video imaging of his brain during deep meditation that I think perhaps you'll find most intriguing. I am delighted to announce that we have a sponsor on Reality Check, and that sponsor is none other than a martial arts god that when I was a little boy, I worshipped intensely. I had his posters on my wall, and he inspired me to learn karate and other martial arts as a young teenager. I'm talking about Chuck Norris. When I was a little boy, there was one movie that I went to watch about 5 times in 1972 called The Way of the Dragon. And it was Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris facing off against each other in the Colosseum in Rome. It was just mighty stuff. And would you believe Chuck Norris is now 84 years old. And while I have broken hands and knees and ankles because of my foolish interest in karate, whacking boards in a dojo late into the night, Chuck Norris's body defies explanation. The man is 84 years old, and yet he's still got the vigor of a man 30 or 40 years younger than him. He's still kicking butt and working out. And what's amazing is he's stronger, he can work out longer, and has plenty of energy left over for his grandkids. He did this, he tells us, by making one change. And he says he still feels like he's in his 50s. His wife's even done the same thing as well, and she's never felt better. She says she feels 10 years younger. Her body looks leaner, and she has energy all day. And Chuck's made a special video that explains everything. And make sure you help us and Chuck by watching it. If you go to chuckdefense.com/Ross and click in the link below in this video, it'll change the way you think about your health. Now, once again, that's chuckdefense.com/Ross. Click on the link in the description below to watch the video. You won't believe how simple it is. Just a reminder, the legendary Chuck Norris is a whopping 84 years old, and yet he's got more energy than me. And his body may be broken, but for some reason, he seems to be able to keep on going. I want to know his secret. I'm going to click on that link. What he's discovered that he could effect dramatic changes to his health simply focusing on 3 things that sabotage our body as we age. Watch his method by clicking on the link in the box below, chuckdefense.com/Ross. Dr. Lani, welcome to Reality Check.
Thanks so much for having me here.
So, Andrea, tell me a little bit about this incident that happened, I think, when you were an 8-year-old boy. This is the first time that you were twigged to the anomalous phenomena.
Absolutely. So it was 1983, and it was during August. And I was basically on a balcony with my parents. And suddenly, it was during the night, maybe like 10 o'clock or something. It was already dark. There was absolutely nobody around in the street or in other balconies. And suddenly, we noticed this object that appears at the same altitude as our balcony. So about 15 meters from the ground, like, I don't know, 45 feet or something like that. And like 10 meters in front, so like 30 feet or something. And as soon as I look at the object immediately started spinning, became luminous. And I'm talking about a spinning like almost like seeing a flying turbine, like thousands of RPM. And actually, I also remember that while it was spinning, I noticed already back then the wobbling around the axis of rotation. And while spinning, it shrank progressively till when it actually disappeared while emitting a flash of light. And then after that, I turned on my left and I asked my mother, "Did you see that?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "What was it according to you?" And she said, "Oh, maybe it was a falling star." Now, my mother is no scientist. I was 8 years old, but I already knew that that was not a falling star. Just standing.
So how many people were there with you at the time this phenomenon showed itself?
Well, my parents. So we were 3 in total. My father doesn't have particular recollections. My mother vaguely remember the phenomenon, but the problem is I don't know I was looking at the phenomenon. I wasn't looking at what they were doing. So maybe my father was distracted and my mother only got a glimpse of it. But what I know is that it was not a falling star because it was standing in front of us. So,
was there a noise?
I remember no noise whatsoever. But one thing that was interesting is that few months after this, let's say, experience, I started losing a little bit of sight, and I had to wear glasses. And that actually, I always found very weird the fact that I was the only one in my family, and I have a very large family, like 17 siblings on the side of my father and 5 on the side of my mother. I was the only one at the time wearing glasses. And but I never connected it to this event. But recently, I saw that I read somewhere that there are other people who actually experienced something like that. After a close encounter, they lost a bit of sight, and then I connected the dots. I said, "Wow, this was just few months after this event."
Now, Doctor, one of the things as a scientist that I'm sure you'll want to understand, and I hope you understand, I've got to be skeptical. You know, this is an account that is quite extraordinary, because I think what you say is that you've developed throughout your lifetime psychic abilities, that you have an ability to use your mind in ways that go beyond what we understand the brain to be capable of. Did you have those abilities before this incident? Are you aware as a child before this incident having these skills?
Absolutely not. And actually, these abilities came very late in my life. I think the first experience that I can associate to some sort of precognition was in 2016. And this was a few days before the terrorist attack in Brussels. I remember I was walking, it was a Sunday afternoon. I was walking next to the central station, And suddenly I meet these two women. They approached me with a very weird English, and I said, "Okay, you can talk Italian, I understand." And and then they basically told me, "Well, we are teachers, and we are here with our classrooms, and we want to go with the kids to visit the Museum of Napoleon." And I said, "Wow, you're really lucky, because I work in the village next to Waterloo, and I go to Waterloo every single day for lunch. So you are asking the right person, you know." And so I said, "Okay, where are you staying?" They said, "Well, we have a hotel nearby the central station." I said, "Well, you know, you just take a train from here, take a bus, and then you go there." And then they told me, "But you know, we are in Brussels, and we would like the kids to try the metro." When they told me metro, I had this flash in my mind, and I thought about the Paris attack, and I thought about, I had an image of a metro blowing up. And I didn't say anything, but I tried anyway to discourage them to take the metro. So I told them, I think if you try to take the metro early in the morning with all these kids, you will get in trouble, because it's really busy. So what happened is, the day of the attack, which was 2 days later, in which actually they bombed the metros as well, my mother told me about an interview that she saw to an Italian guy who survived. And while looking for this interview, what I actually found online was an article talking about these two teachers with their kids, showing a picture saying that basically they actually took the metro, and they took actually the metro before the one that was bombed. So I don't know if I played a role in that event to prevent something to happen, but definitely I had a premonition. So that was the first time.
So you would call that a precognition, if you like. You had some kind of telepathic pre-sentient notion of what was going to happen.
I think so.
So let's go back a little bit in your childhood, because I know that the incident that happened to you when you were 8 years old, that's not the only incident, is it? And you also had an uncle who reported seeing something very similar in the same place where you and your family had your experience.
Absolutely. So this happened a couple of weeks after we had already left, and he was on the same balcony, originally alone, and he was looking up, and on his left, high in the sky, about 150 meters, let's say 450 feet or something, he saw this object arriving very slowly, rotating, and it was like blasting some beams of light of different color. So it was a traditional, let's say, dome with a saucer under it, spinning very slowly. And he called the wife. He said, "Come to the balcony, look up, do you see it?" And she saw it as well. And then they look at it. He said for about 45 seconds, more or less. This was his perception of time. And then the object suddenly increased the rotation speed, became like a glowing red ball of light, and darted off at an incredible speed. After this, yeah.
It's an amazing story. I mean, did he photograph it? Is there a corroborative witness? His wife says she saw the same thing, I suspect.
Yeah, the wife saw the same thing. He didn't have time to take any picture, but they both experienced some sort of hallucination during the night. So while waking up, he opens his eyes, and he has the impression of seeing a face of a human, but made of fire, with long hair that was like trembling like that. And then he was like shake up a little bit, and it disappeared. And then he was talking to the wife, and the wife said, "You know, this night I had a very strange dream. I saw Jesus Christ made of fire in our bedroom." And so by connecting what he saw with this guy with long hair and what she saw in her dream, it's an interesting coincidence.
So Andrea, you're a scientist. What has been the big incident in your life that convinced you that you were seeing something that is genuinely anomalous? Obviously, as an 8-year-old boy, that's quite an amazing incident, but I can imagine there's been more recent incidents. Take me through the array of phenomena that you've experienced.
Yes, so I had to wait till 2017 to actually have another UFO encounter. Again, a very close one. And this time it was very different. So basically I was stargazing during the night in this house, And I had this thought: how cool would it be to have the same experience that I had when I was a child? Now that I'm an aerospace engineer and I could, look at details and understand a little better what I'm looking at. And then I basically went to sleep. At the time, that was my ex-girlfriend, already lying on the bed, and she made me notice a very strange sound. It was like a high pitch kind of squeaking, and I couldn't associate it to any machinery or anything. Consider it was 1 o'clock in the night, and so I was basically staring at the ceiling. At a certain moment, I see a single ray of green light entering from my window, and in the matter of 1 second, the whole room is completely enlightened in bright green light. And so I look at her, I said, let's go to the window, let's see what happened. And I remember she basically turned her face to the wall and said, no, let me sleep. I didn't want to investigate that. I just wanted to see what the hell was going on in my backyard. So I pulled the curtain and I saw two discs of green light, very bright green light, they were moving together, flying over my backyard. The perception of distance for me was like maybe 10 meters or something of this order, because if they were really high in the sky, they were gigantic. So I tend to believe they were very close and they were relatively small, about 2 meters in diameter each. How I can estimate that is that I saw them passing over the roof of the neighbor, and I know the size of the facade of the neighbor, which is more or less 6 meters. So, and then I went upstairs to try to see if I could see further, and I couldn't. But, that was interesting to have this kind of experience immediately after having asked for it.
Now, Andrea, you actually became a scientist, didn't you, because of that incident that happened to you when you were an 8-year-old boy?
Absolutely.
Can you tell me why? What was the reason?
Well, let's say that it got me interested in technology, got me interested in physics, astrophysics, and when I had to decide what to do in life, my thought was, I want to get to a point in my life in which I understand what I saw that day, because I understood that was very anomalous. It was like almost peeping through a door that lead you somewhere else. And so, yeah, and basically when I had to decide what to do, I was undecided between astrophysics and engineering, aerospace engineering, and they suggested me to go towards engineering because I would have had more chances to find a job as an engineer than a physicist. And I followed that. The funny thing is that later in life, I ended up working together with astrophysicists as well. So now I'm working a little bit on the modeling of space weather and a little bit on the modeling of hypersonic flows around space vehicles.
So I've got to ask this, Dr. Lani. In the course of your work for NASA or any of these agencies, have you ever come across an aerospace technology that you think defies conventional explanation?
Absolutely not, but I have to say I never had the chance to work on classified technology. So it was mostly, simulation of some experiments which are non-classified. You can publish them, and it was rather ordinary, technology for hypersonic vehicles. So yeah, definitely not.
Where do you stand on the speculation pushed by people whom I know you know, David Grush and others, who are suggesting that there is this secret reverse engineering program going on inside private aerospace and indeed in sections of the US government and intelligence community that is concealing the retrieval of non-human technology? Do you find it plausible?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there have been during these decades a lot of high-profile people who came out with insider information, and I don't know why I would doubt this kind of people. So.
And what do you think the attitude is within your profession to your attitudes towards the paranormal and anomalous phenomena? Is it received with skepticism, or is there a greater willingness to be open-minded about the possibilities of this kind of phenomena?
Yeah, what I can say is that in my own environment, what I saw is that a lot of people, of course, is skeptic, but also a lot of people have no knowledge whatsoever about the phenomenon. They've never researched anything. Maybe they saw sometimes something popping up on the news or in a local newspaper, but they never research it actively. But then once you focus the attention on some people, on some of the stuff, then they get interested. And I have during let's say the last few years, I have seen astrophysicists, I have seen space engineers, people that in my environment, if I would tell that this person actually is very interested in that and actually had experiences, they would not believe it. But so there is a group that is growing of people that are getting information, are getting experiences also within the environment in which I'm working, which normally is very stigma driven and very close-minded.
I was going to ask, is there a risk of blowback for you in speaking so candidly about your experiences with what, after all, can easily be stigmatized and treated with taboo and suspicion?
Yes, there is a risk. I received pressure before from multiple sources, but I have to say, it comes to a moment in which people need to be aware that these phenomena are real, and there are a lot of people, and I'm not talking about just thousands, millions of people who are having experiences, and we are not talking about just Chinese balloons. So somebody who has experiences, especially somebody like me, also with a scientific background, that has maybe more tools than others to evaluate if an experience is anomalous or just ordinary. I think, people in this position have to have the courage to come out and say, okay, I had that experience, and I can tell you, at least for what I know about physics or technology, that thing was not normal, non-human probably. So
Okay, I'm going to show you a video that you very kindly sent me earlier, which is an attempt, I understand, by you to explain the phenomenon. The video of you versus the journalist. So there's an image of you on the left, and your whole head is very largely illuminated with a yellow light, a golden light. And on the right, there's what appears to be a woman's face. And I presume this is some kind of infrared or perhaps a hyperspectral imaging camera. Talk me through what we're looking at.
Okay, so first of all, just a little bit of story about how I got there. So in 2023, I got connected with this Italian journalist called Sabrina Pieragostini, who actually wrote about 4 books about UFOs and some other phenomena. And she involved me actually in her last one. She was looking for somebody writing the foreword, and we connected. I shared some of my experiences, and she said, would be nice to have you writing the foreword. So that's how I got connected to her. And then after that, she said, I know some people that would be really interesting to do some tests with you. So what I told her is that, since some time, I have these experiences in which after I during meditation, whether I do it alone or with other people, we sort of create some sort of connection with other beings. And so people feel energies, have visions, and I did also some tests at the Institute of Noetic Sciences in which they did some experiments with EEG on 11 meditators. And what they saw is that for each of the 11 meditators, their brain waves changed dramatically when they were doing a meditation like freestyle, the way they wanted, and a meditation like that I had pre-recorded on video saying explicitly, I'm going to connect you, what I call it a Stargate, or let's say a portal or some kind of communication channel. And what they saw is that for each of them, if you look at the brain waves from delta to gamma, there were considerable differences for all of the participants. And some of them also had experiences like the one that that people meditating with me had. So at some point, I was looking for more evidence. And so thanks to the journalist, we met in Milan with 2 guys. One is a forensic technical consultant, he's also an electronic engineer, and the other one is a physicist or an engineer. They work together and they develop actually these hyperspectral cameras that can see beyond the visible, so both in ultraviolet and infrared. And what they did is they placed 2 cameras. One was a polarimetric camera mounting a sensor which is actually used by space agencies, and another one was another camera, hyperspectral, and they did different kind of measurements while I was meditating. So when I meditate, I instantaneously drop into some state and I connect. And what they could see, so first of all, they also tested the journalist as a point of reference of the day in the same place, same time. And but they had already tested about 30 people before. And what they saw is that for people who don't have any contact experience or any meditation experience, they all fit the same kind of energetic signature, which is the one that you see for the journalist in the video. So basically, you see the energy is mostly concentrated in the eyes. So the highest level of energy, which is visualized in this case with white light or golden, if you want, is concentrated in the eyes. And then there is maybe some little activity. But in my case, this energy is distributed equally over all my face, except for a region which is very well defined that almost look like a mask around my eyes. And it never changed. And the interesting thing was that even when I'm not meditating, this high level of energy is present. So it's like a permanent feature that is anomalous. They've never seen something like that, that I have.
And was that with the hyperspectral camera, or with the, what did you say it was, the polarimetric camera?
Polarimetric, like to measure the polarization of light. But also in that case, it works in the UV and infrared range. So.
And so this one we're looking at now, this is the hyperspectral camera, and that shows the golden light right across your head, apart from your eyes. And the same eye light is emanating just from the woman's eyes in her section. Was she meditating at all?
Not really, no. But another thing that I have to say, so you're looking at the energy signature, and what they are measuring is actually the biophotonic field. So we emit light, and so but we emit light also in the infrared and the ultraviolet. So that's what they're interested in, and that's where they see things happening. So another thing that you see happening in my case is this toroidal field that forms around my head, and also occasionally forms a sort of cross. And then I remember when we were doing the test, the guy said, "Whoa, look at that. You see this cross?" And then they say, "Well, it's almost like you are targeted by something." And then the other one said, "Yeah, but it looks like it's coming, out of your face. It's not really something coming from outside." So
what is it, Dr. Lani? Explain it to me, please. You're the scientist. What does it mean?
What I can say, I have my own theory. What I can say is that, in spiritual circles, they always talk about raising your vibration through meditation, increase your frequency, your energy. And I think you can get to a point in which this becomes measurable. So also, since centuries, people have been talking about kind of enlightenment, but is this measurable? Maybe this is a measure of some kind of enlightenment, or, a measure of a process towards what they call enlightenment. Definitely it's not a glitch. It's something, they did the test 3 times, and in between they tested the journalist. The settings of the camera were completely the same, and the difference in energy is really, like, if you see between the dark and the light in there is really consistent. So it's like they say, this is really something.
So what's your hypothesis when you're meditating? Are you aware that you are communicating with something somewhere else?
Absolutely. Actually,
so what are you feeling? What's going through your head?
I got into meditation with the specific purpose of making connection, but it took some time to have the haha moment in which you really feel something. You feel energy, you see stuff, and then they tell you, we'll give you a sign, and then this thing happened. And anyway, so in the process, at this point, because anyway, I've been doing this already for 4 years. At this point, I just close my eyes, and basically I can connect whenever I want. And when I decide to connect, I feel a sort of electric impulse. And sometimes this electric impulse makes my head twitch a little bit. And you see it even in these videos. And it's something really physical. It's like you create some sort of energetic connection. which manifests itself in your body being traversed by high frequency currents that in some way they don't burn me. It's like, if you have high frequency currents going through a material, unless this material is a superconductor, it will generate heating. And I know about superconductors because I'm working in projects dealing with that. So for my understanding, you can get to a point in which your body works as a superconductor for these energies. And then the fun begins. So I don't know if, I think I got to that point. I don't know how, I don't know why me. There are many other people, I think, who have similar experiences. It's just that maybe they're not so vocal and maybe they don't have a chance to do this kind of test. Luckily, I know engineers, I know people with technology, and I can experiment.
So when you communicate, I'm really interested in drilling down into what you say happens when you meditate. Are you saying that you are consciously engaging with something that is an intelligence that is non-human?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. And what I can say, or what, from my point of view, from my understanding at the moment, we are not just engaging with one kind of intelligence. It's very busy out there, and so people have been trying to, communicate with angels, with gods since millennia, and I believe this is an actual possibility. You can actually engage in this kind of communication, and they are able to interact even on the physical level with you. And I make you an example. The first time that I had this connection during meditation, so I felt this extraordinary energy. My eyelids started flickering in an uncontrollable way, and then I started having these very vivid visuals of entities, but I couldn't see them like in details. I could just see robed entities emanating some light on my left in blue, on my right in green, and then I saw a face which maybe you will show later on. But then I asked, okay, but then they told me the message that I was receiving is that you can do this kind of meditation with other people and they will have similar experiences as you will have, and you can use this for healings. And then I said, okay, well, healings, let's try with myself. At the time I had a ligament injury on my left wrist. It was a relapse. The previous time I had to take a cortisone injection, and this was already, almost a year before. And then I had another accident and a lot of pain. Sometimes I couldn't even the day before, I couldn't hold the cup without feeling pain up to my elbow. So I said, okay, if you can really heal, can you heal this one? And then what happened is I did a meditation, and I even forgot exactly what was the purpose of the meditation. I had connection, and then I'm walking out from the park, and I hear this internal voice like, check your wrist. I was like, oh, yeah. And then I move the wrist in whatever way, I put pressure, I lift weights. It was solved, and it never came back again. So
now, can I put on my? I feel duty bound to be the skeptic, because you're a scientist. What you're claiming there is obviously quite extraordinary, and you're not the first person, by the way, Dr. Lani, to tell me you've had phenomena like this. Interestingly, one of the people that I've spoken to, and he told me this in great detail in another interview, was Professor Gary Nolan from Stanford University, not talking about healing, but talking about vibrations. I think the thing that really struck me from what you were saying very early on was this description of your whole body vibrating.
mm-hmm.
And it's a very common phenomenon described by people who believe that they're having encounters with non-human intelligences. Why, as a scientist, do you believe that what is happening to you is most likely engagement with a non-human intelligence? Just to put my debunker skeptic hat on for a moment, isn't it possible that this is some kind of dream state or hallucination? Why do you believe it's real?
Well, if this dream also manifests in your life with physical events like a healing, or like they tell you go to this place and something will happen, and then you go to that place and you see signs related exactly to the thing that they told you a month before that would happen. I mean, we don't have the time to go into all the details, but I had all kind of experiences that gave me absolutely no doubt that I'm in contact with something which is non-human, or maybe it's cosmic, maybe spiritual, whatever it is something outside the visible world.
Now, this is what I want to explore with you, Doctor, because I'm really struck. I was listening to a Joe Rogan interview the other day with Robert Epstein, and he was talking about the idea of the brain being a transducer, and the idea that essentially a lot of memory is not stored in the brain, he believes, but he speculated that perhaps what the brain is a device that allows us to convert energy to communicate with somewhere else.
Mhm.
And a lot of this goes through in modern mythology, and a lot of the stories that go back in, even ancient texts. They talk about the importance of the pineal gland in the brain. Can you talk to that, please? What do you know about the pineal gland, and basically why is it relevant to you having the experiences that you've had? And let's talk about the images that you've been able to get showing what happens to your, is it pineal or pineal gland in your brain?
Mhm. Yeah, so I believe we function like some sort of antennas, and we constantly emit signals and also receive signals. And then if you're able to tap in specific frequencies, maybe you can receive communication from elsewhere, right? So basically these tests were conducted in the same day in which I did the test with this hyperspectral camera. And they're just looking at the data in a different way. So they are able basically to visualize the activity in terms of frequencies of whatever part of the image they focus on. They take a video in in full spectrum, and then they focus. They can focus on your eyes, they can focus on your brain, they can focus. So in that picture, they focus in particular on a place close to the pineal gland. What they found also in previous studies is that when they analyze meditators, they see some sort of torsional field generating in this area. And you see the spinning of this energy, or let's say this structure, and they can visualize it. They can visualize basically different frequencies with different colors. So in these images, what you see is exactly that. You see some a torsional kind of field spanning different frequencies and different colors. But the interesting thing that I've never seen before were these flashes of light that blasted off my body as soon as I connected. So at the beginning, you see the image is like gray, black and white, with just some little activity in here. That's how you should see it normally. But once I start meditating,
and just so I'm clear, in the images that you've sent me, there's a screenshot in black and white of you meditating, and you see a green spot at the point on your skull where the pineal gland would be located.
yeah. So indeed, so you cannot drill a hole in your head, but that's the closest location in which you can monitor the activity around that area,
And so what's the camera that's being used there? Again, is that the hyperspectral camera?
Yes, it's a hyperspectral camera. We're talking about cameras which are custom made. They use also special software and special hardware. Like the computers have to be cooled down more than traditional computers because they use very heavy post-processing algorithms. And yeah, so they can look at whatever. They also look at my eyes. Unfortunately, I don't have any picture for that. But they look at the light coming off my eyes. And normally, with people, they see that both in amplitude and frequency, the light coming off the eyes are different, like different amplitude, different. They are not in phase. But as soon as I start meditating, they saw that actually they overlap perfectly, both in amplitude and frequency for both eyes. But the frequency it's much higher. It's like order of magnitude higher than the frequency they normally see of the light coming off the eyes of other people. So,
and is this a frequency that you've been able to measure? Like, do you know the frequency at which the pineal gland is operating when it's having this connection?
No, I don't know. I should ask these guys. But yeah, normally they look also within the range 050 hertz, because that's also the range of the brain waves. So they can also visualize the activity of the different brain waves, delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. So
do you believe what you're seeing there in that imagery is visual evidence to show that your pineal gland is doing something separately from the rest of the brain, that it might be perhaps, for example, as Robert Epstein speculates, it might be operating like some kind of transducer?
absolutely, that's what we believe.
And so what fascinates me is that through history, even ancient history, there's imagery even in the Egyptian antiquity of what looks like the pineal gland on some of the walls on the ancient monuments in ancient Egypt. And you see this image of what is structured like a pineal gland. Do you think there is a knowledge that was held by the ancients that we perhaps in our modern era have lost?
Yeah, absolutely. So they consider the pineal gland as a sort of point of contact between worlds, like our material world and the spiritual world. And even if you find this reference in the Egyptian, but you even find it in Christianity, and it's a bit more hidden, but they absolutely know what they talk about when discussing about pineal gland.
So let's talk about the weird, anomalous phenomena that you've experienced in your life. Obviously, you said that you saw another UFO in 2017. Did you have any anomalous phenomena in that period between the age of 8 and in 2017? Or was your life pretty normal up until then?
I didn't see UFOs, but I had some kind of sleep paralysis experiences in which I would wake up. This happened 3 times in Turin and twice or maybe 3 times in Belgium, in Brussels. So this was around 1999, 2000, so the years in which I was writing my thesis, basically. And so I woke up completely paralyzed, fully conscious, feeling as I was levitating. I couldn't move even a little finger, trying to open my eyes, nothing. And I would feel this very intense vibration throughout my body at a very high frequency. I've been in earthquakes. This was something completely different, and it was coming from inside my body. And at the same time, I was also feeling a high-pitched sound inside my head that was increasing in frequency by the second. And so I panicked and I started praying Mother Mary, and it stopped. And then it happened again within a few weeks. And again, I panicked. And after that experience, I started researching online. Internet was not as developed as now, but you could find some information. So that some people were saying, well, sleep paralysis is just a psychological temporary disorder of your system. Some were saying, well, it can be an intermediate stage before an out-of-body experience. And some other were talking about abductions. Now, in abductions, sometimes people reported, including also maybe Gary Nolan, seeing entities around the bed or something that I couldn't see absolutely nothing. I would just feel this very intense, vibration and sound. And so it happened again. This time I tried to control the fear, and I said, okay, let's see how far this goes. And actually, no, it just stopped again. And it happened again like 6 years later when I was in Brussels. I wasn't surprised. I was actually excited in the moment. I said, yeah, maybe this time something happens. And then it stopped. And then it happened another time, and that's it. So I would say, I didn't have any other. Well, I had another experience which was interesting in South Africa in 2006. So basically, we were driving, and we noticed that there was a bunch of whales that came very close to the cliffs. So we stopped the car and we started running towards the cliff to see. It was like 15, 20 whales, even coming out of the water. And I was the last one. and I started running. When I arrived there, I basically stepped on something, bumped into something, and my body completely lost the balance. And I felt, I had this flash in my mind, I'm dead, because there was no way that something could balance back my body at that speed to not fall down the cliff. It was really a straight fall. And I felt this pressure, a strong wind pushing in my chest and putting me back on my feet. And yeah, so at the time I didn't say anything to anybody. I think not even to my girlfriend. But this thing remained in my mind. It's like in my mind I was already dead. There was no way I could stop myself in the situation. So yeah.
You mentioned earlier that when you prayed to Mother Mary, it went away. I mean, are you a religious person, and do you think that there is a religious connection here? Could the Catholic Church have a point?
Well, I mean, I was brought Catholic. I have always been a Catholic, let's say, up to my mid-20s with a lot of doubts. But you know, I love the personal, you know, the personality of Jesus as somebody, you know, sort of embracing this unconditional love, this peace, this whatever. But I always felt a disconnection with the structure, the structure of power created by the church. So I don't consider myself religious, but I am very attracted by Jesus' teachings, even though I also know that there have been some manipulation on the original message. And for instance, the early Christians believed in reincarnation, believed in meditation, and also in healing practices. And all this was wiped out from the Bible during the Nicene Council with Constantine I. So when you talk about Christianity, one should really go back and study let's say the very ancient text, and not this gospel that we see now, which is a bit the manipulation, I would say.
Well, do you think that what you're learning through your direct meditation, you believe, with some kind of non-human intelligence, I mean, could it be what Christianity and other religions you believe are trying to suppress?
It's some, you know, there is a very like thin line between what people like me are connecting to and what, you know, angels or spiritual entities that have been in contact with people and they are reported in religions. So I don't know, for sure there is a level of suppression, but it's coming out because people are having these experiences and they're sharing them. So
as an Italian, do you believe the Vatican knows a lot more about anomalous phenomena than it cares to publicly let on?
Well, I'm not the one that should say that, but yeah, probably. A lot of people report, you know, this information, and people with knowledge, not just me that reads the news, you know, or the reports of others. So
let's talk about what you're seeing when you're doing your meditations and engaging with what you believe is a non-human intelligence. When you see these beings, are they humanoid or are they something else?
Well, I have to say, in 4 years, I meditated every day at least once. My meditations typically are very, very short, like maybe 10 minutes. Sometimes when it's a group meditation, and I did a lot, especially at the beginning, it can last also longer, maybe an hour or something. I've seen a lot. I've seen really a lot. Some look like some of these Indian gods. Some don't have really a shape. In some cases, you just hear them somehow in your own voice. In some other cases, they are non-human, insectoids, for instance, or mantis, for instance, or also ants. Some other look like humans. Some other look like these gods that you see in the Egyptian hieroglyphs, like Anubis, like with a or with a lion head or with a cat head. And I mean, I'm not the only one having these experiences. A lot of people in my circle, and I know really hundreds of people, let's say, that have similar experiences and sometimes see even the same entity within the same meditation. So
Can I ask you about this, Andrea? I'm really struck at the moment how all around the world there are people. Since I first talked about it, I talked about blue beings, and I said it almost on a whimsy. I just mentioned casually that there were people reaching out to me who claimed to be in contact with blue entities, and yet what's fascinating is I get the impression people all over the world, like dozens of people, have contacted me with stories of being downloaded with information, of given creative ideas or intellectual notions, in some cases, incredible scientific gifts in their mind. What do you think's going on? I mean, obviously, you believe as a child what you were shown when you were 8 years old. That wasn't a coincidence, was it? I mean, do you think that phenomenon was manifesting itself to you specifically?
yes, I do think so. It was almost like inspiring me. I mean, it's like it shows some sort of oversight that go beyond time. It's like I have to come here and show you something so that you will later on make this choice at that specific moment in your life. And
So,
you know,
so you're feeling guided. You're feeling that the purpose in your life is intrinsically connected to that experience that you had when you were an 8-year-old kid.
if I hadn't had that experience, probably I wouldn't have become an aerospace engineer. I would be in a completely different path.
I'm really struck by that. I'm really struck by how many people I meet and I talk to who tell me that their experience with the phenomenon, it's not just, say, a UFO. Often it's weird experiences like you've described, vibrations, being in their bed and being paralyzed and then having experiences with what they believe are entities, beings of some kind. But what fascinates me is how people seem driven by a purpose after they've had those experiences. That's been your experience, clearly.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I know that there is this narrative about the threat posed by some of these entities, and I do believe that maybe some of them are really a threat for us, or at least controlling and trying to manipulate us in some way. But I also believe that some of them are absolutely positive and benevolent, doing healings, inspiring people. And you just look at history, you just look at religions. There is always the balance between angels and demons. They call them in different ways, but it's always the same. So there is some sort of evil force or self-serving to the least, and then there is another one which is benevolent and try to inspire and do something good. So
Have you encountered evil forces in your time navigating through these experiences?
yes, but I've been in situations in which I've interacted with accidentally, let's say, with some negative entities, and the way it manifested for me is with extreme pain. Like just for me and for other people, I had situations in which I participated to a meeting, and it was like 45 people, all with some spiritual background, and there was one person that didn't show the face, and I thought immediately this person is doing something, and immediately after I felt sick. My friend felt sick that was in my room, and another friend that participated in her own house, she also felt sick. And then I actually closed my eyes, I meditate, and I saw a dark entity. And when I sort of remove it, everybody felt better. Like my friend had a pain here, it disappeared like that.
Now, Andrea, you understand conventional science, traditional science, mainstream science, so called, would dismiss what you say and say it's not real because
Absolutely.
and yet you are to some degree quantifying it, you're measuring it, you're detecting something happening when you are engaging with this phenomenon. You can actually see it with the imagery that you've very kindly shown us. One of the issues that's fascinating to me as a journalist is that science struggles to understand not just the issue of UFOs, UAPs, flying saucers, aliens, ETs. It struggles to understand anything anomalous or paranormal. And yet there's a reality there, isn't there?
Yes, and the good news is that now we have some technology which can give us insight into this. So we cannot maybe see the entity itself, but we can study the interaction. We can see that if when somebody is experiencing something, there are some measurable effects. So this is it's a game changer in the discussion. One thing is to just say, okay, I see something, but another thing is to show something like I showed with these videos, in which you see a level of energy which is completely anomalous with other people. So there must be something in there. So, or either I am a different kind of human, or there is something in there. So,
Well, there's also the fact that if you don't look, you won't find. And one of the things that I find really interesting about a lot of establishment science is it has an obdurate resistance to even considering the possibility that the sort of things you're describing are real, doesn't it?
that's why actually, even though I have positions which are a bit different from the one of Avi Loeb, who is really nuts and bolts kind of scientist, but I really appreciate what he's doing is in trying to call out, this mainstream science and said, look, if you don't look, you don't find. If you would put a fraction of the money that you put in the CERN experiments or in the SETI program into this, and I can say, for instance, into scanning with MRIs people that have experiences, or in using these hyperspectral devices, or for whatever. I mean, you would find a lot of answers. So, and at the moment, a big obstacle for people like me is that public funding is not available for this kind of exciting investigations that can change mankind from one day to another, like in a way that has never seen before. So this sort of how can I say, infuriates me, the fact that we are hostage of this mindset. And so the only chance you have to make this kind of investigations, which require a lot of resources. So as I said, this technology is expensive. Like a hyperspectral camera like that is a 50,000 euro device. Then you have to post-process the data. It takes you weeks. If you don't find funding privately, you basically, or you put the money yourself, then you cannot advance. And so we are sort of hostage of the mainstream position of people that don't see the benefit of something that is really, in which there is something to investigate.
So what's going on though? I mean, do you think it's just science having discomfort with something that it can't immediately quantify or measure? Or is there a more deliberate conspiracy going on? Do you think there is some in science who know about this phenomenon but want to suppress it?
I don't want to enter into this territory. What I can say, the simplest explanation is just cognitive dissonance. It's like you are brought up since an early age within you are sort of programmed to think that reality is only what you can see with your eyes, and then you figure out, for instance, that you cannot see the signals that your Wi-Fi is operating, but they're there. There's something, there's something physical. You can measure it, you cannot see it. So you have to go beyond what you can see with your senses, or feel with your senses, and explore it or more.
If I go though through the logical narrative of what you've described very kindly in your account to me today, the implication is that the intelligence that manifested itself to you when you were an 8-year-old boy deliberately seeded you with an awareness of anomalous phenomena with the intention of twigging your consciousness. And I wonder sometimes whether that's not being done to a lot of people that contact me. I get overwhelmed by people contacting me, telling me their experiences, and I find it very exciting. I love sharing and hearing what people are describing to me. And being, I can tell you, my friend, a dogged skeptic who's been very resistant to even considering the possibility that any of this might be real, what strikes me is the voluminous quantity of witness evidence where people are describing having their awareness of something else
Mhm.
twigged by a major event, such as what you've described, and then they devote their lives to a particular field of study or investigation, or in some cases, creative arts. You know, they're painters, they're musicians, and they're inspired to develop that art. But what fascinates me is it possible that what you're describing is some kind of intelligence that is actually trying to seed humanity with ideas?
Yeah, I do think so. And it's possible that they try to do it with everybody, but some people just don't listen, or dismiss certain phenomena that, maybe sometimes they saw something and they didn't devote attention to it, and it could have played a role. And
Give me an explanation though. Why wouldn't they be more overt? You know, if they want us to be aware of the other realms that we're talking about here, if they want us to learn how to meditate and to learn how to engage with them, why not be more overt?
well, I think they stick, or at least the benevolent one, stick to some degree of non-intervention, and so they try to limit as much as possible. They give breadcrumbs, but in a way that you have to understand that is a breadcrumb, and some people just don't see it, and they do it over and over again. And the moment you start understanding what you are looking at and you start following the breadcrumbs, then they lead you somewhere.
The implication, though, behind what you're talking about is that there must be, this is what you believe as a scientist, there must be a way of scientifically explaining the phenomenon that you're describing, that this encounter perhaps with the divine or some other realm that you're having, it might actually be scientifically investigatable and measurable. It's just that we're not looking.
Absolutely, and I think it will get better and better with these new technologies. Just think about the pilots. They made an upgrade to their FLIR system, and suddenly they see objects all the time. It's you just have to look in frequencies and spectra which are beyond the visible, and you will hear stuff, you will see stuff, and so on. I just want to also talk about.
Well, no, please finish what you were saying, because I do have another question, but I just want to hear the rest of what you're saying. I think it's important.
One of my early experiences, so I had this healing in my ligament injury, but then a couple of days after that, I had another phenomenon which was really interesting. Basically, I stopped meditating, and then I hear this sound. I was meditating with the headphones, so I hear this modulated sound. It almost sounded like a robotic voice, but I don't want to go that far. But let's say very modulated. And I said, what is that? And I look at my phone. There was absolutely no app. There was no YouTube, no nothing. There was absolutely no app that was working at the moment. But this sound was coming, and it was not just a single sound. It was really modulated. And then I unplugged the headphones, and the sound was still there. So it was not in the environment. And it lasted for some time, maybe a minute or half a minute. And then I said, wow, it almost looks like some form of communication, no? And then I remember that, so in let's say 2000, no, what was it? 1992, I joined a rock band. I was the new drummer, okay? And so the first time we went to the rehearsal room, we decided to record on a brand new cassette. And at the end of the recording, there was a sound which was very much like this one. And at the time, there was no reason why this sound had been recorded, because during the playing, we didn't see anything strange. We didn't hear any strange sound. But then there was this strange sound for minutes. And then we look at each other and said, maybe it's something paranormal, but maybe it was a spirit. I don't know. We don't have any explanation. But then, then I made a connection later on. I said, well, this sound reminds me of something. Oh, yeah, it happened in 1992. It is very similar. I don't know. I don't know the logic of this, but you know, I see a connection.
But more importantly, what fascinates me about you, Dr. Andrea Lani, is you are motivated, more motivated than most scientists to investigate this phenomena because of those experiences you've had. You're convinced they're real, and you feel, and I admire you for this, you feel an obligation to talk about it publicly, even though you risk a high degree of stigma and ridicule for doing so.
Yes, I have to say I'm also lucky because I know that there is people who are having these experiences and they are sort of alone. They don't talk to friends or family or whatever. They try to live their experience by themselves. But I have a circle of people that I know, also scientists and engineers and whatever, who are having all kinds of experiences. And so I'm not alone. And there is a lot of people out there that is like me, wants answers, and the only way to find answers is to seek them. So
one of the things you've talked about, you hinted about this earlier, was these weird synchronicities where you've been told to go to various places or to see certain things. What's the weirdest anomalous phenomena experience that you've had?
well, I can mention the case of the cat that got trapped into my house. So basically, this was on the 21st June 2020. I did a meditation in a park nearby with 7 friends, all women. And during this meditation, one of these friends went into a trance channeling state. So she was taken over by some entities actually, that spoke through her. They were speaking a little bit in English and a little bit in some other language that we couldn't understand. And but in the meantime, we were also feeling energies, something very physical. And this lasted for about 25 minutes. I myself was completely drained. I couldn't move after that. The energies that I felt were something that I never felt before. Then I took a walk after a while and said, okay, let's try it again. This looks like fun. And we reconnected, and the same thing happened again. And especially, I have the audio, but it's something that I wouldn't share for the moment. But these entities had something to say to me, particularly through this person who was channeling. So what happened is I went home, and I found my neighbor in front of the door. I never had any interaction with this neighbor. And she said, well, somebody from the house in front of yours saw my cat entering your house from the window. I had a window open, very slanted or something. The cat somehow seemed to have managed to enter. So we entered the house. I said, okay, let's look for him. So we go room by room. We close the door. We go in the basement. She was screaming the name of the cat. The cat is nowhere to be found. I said, sorry, maybe your friend didn't see correctly. And then 3 days later, so for 3 days, I had no sign whatsoever of life from a cat. Like, there was nothing wrong. I couldn't find anything around. And sometimes I was going to rooms again and close the door and check everywhere. But, I had little furniture. This was a big cat. It was impossible for a cat like that not to be found in 3 days, okay? But so at the time, I was meditating, and the message I was receiving is, this cat has been sent to your house. And remember, the cat entered the house when we were having this experience in the park, to give you evidence of the non-linearity of time, which is a very strange message. And I had a friend in Italy. This guy is a photo reporter, and he's also a medium, trained also in shamanic stuff, Reiki, Theta healing, whatever. And he was giving me a message like, yeah, it's almost like the cat is stuck in between worlds. And so the 4th day, finally I find some poo, let's say, upstairs, and then a ripped off trash bag in downstairs. So, and the door was closed between the two. So I don't know how he managed to do that, but it's something else to be investigated. But so I put my laptop to record during the night to try to catch the cat. I put some food. And then after 56 minutes in the video, which is 9 hours, 18 minutes, 18 seconds, the cat enters the room, jump on the sofa, and then for 6 minutes, the video freezes. And then after that, the video accelerates 100 times. So you have to accelerate to let's say, slow down 100 times to see one single frame in which you see the cat in the middle of the room, and then it disappears, and then it comes back in the room. And I've shown this video to a lot of people, physicists and stuff, and they all got very interested. This could be the famous, some people talk about the Schrödinger cat.
The Schrödinger cat. I was about to say Schrödinger's cat. Yeah.
This could be a variation, let's say, some sort of quantum cat in which, the observer was the laptop, and he observed something very weird. And then if you think about it, you saw first the video freezes. So it's almost like time freezes, then it accelerates. So time accelerates, and then it goes back to normal. So it slowed down. So it was consistent with the message that I received for, three days before. And I would have never thought I could catch something like that on camera.
Dr. Andrea Lani, I have to say your views are provocative, but very thought-provoking. And I must confess, hearing your candor is what I respect and admire most. It's not often that a scientist who's worked with NASA, somebody who's worked in astrophysics and mechanical engineering at such a high level, is prepared to talk about the limitations of science in describing anomalous phenomena. Maybe one day you might be the guy that provides us with the breakthrough that helps us understand what's really going on.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not important. It's me. It's important that science engage, and there are attempts, by Gary Nolan, by Avi Loeb, by a lot of the people that also So something is changing, and if we get some public funding for research, it will change even faster.
Well, just in closing, do you think that the phenomenon is being more overt, that it's trying to let us know it's there?
Yeah, it really looks like you really see some sort of momentum growing. It's my vision is that I see this snowball that is rolling down, and there is no way to stop it at this point. So.
Well, sir, I certainly hope you're right. It'd be great to get some answers. Dr. Andrea Lani, thank you so much for sharing your stories with Reality Check. And I sincerely hope that one day you get those scientific answers that you so obviously crave.
Thank you very much. It was a very, very nice conversation.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And please don't forget to click that red subscribe button to ensure you get more of NewsNation's unbiased and fact-driven news coverage.